Hey there, Diocese of Western New York. My name is Michael Hunn, and I'm the Bishop of the Diocese of the Rio Grande, which encompasses the entire state of New Mexico and the far west part of Texas. And I'm grateful to my friend and colleague, Luke Fedor. Luke, it's good to see you, my friend. Thank you for inviting me to do this little video about some of my thoughts about what it means to be a bishop and a diocese in the Episcopal Church today. I've been the Bishop of the Diocese of Rio Grande for, it'll be 7 complete years starting this November. What does a healthy, vibrant discernment look like in a diocese today? First, I want to begin by saying that I was a transition minister for 9 years, and then I supported the transition ministers as canon to the presiding bishop for another 3 years. So I've done a lot of thinking about discernment in formal settings. Discernment, of course, is an acknowledgement theologically that it is not just our will and our ideas that are meant to control and guide us as we are followers of Jesus Christ, but in fact, we are always trying to discern God's will and to follow God's will. So how do we as a people, as a congregation, or even a diocese discern God's will? A couple of thoughts about that. I find it most helpful to ask myself the question, who is God calling me to be? And what is the work God is calling me to do? And I think a diocese can answer those questions as well by seeking to not just ask individuals what do they think God is calling them to be and do, but rather, as the Diocese of Western New York, in this moment, who are you called to be? And I'd flesh that out by saying, there are a lot of different ways to be an Episcopal diocese. There are a lot of different ways to be a follower of Jesus Christ. And today in the United States, there are a lot of different ways to be a Christian. So who are you called to be? And how would you describe that as the Diocese of Western New York? What makes you distinct, unique, and different from other ways of being Christian? What are the particular charisms or characters that would define you in a way that might be different from other dioceses of the Episcopal Church? What are specific capacities and skills and interests that you have as the Diocese of Western New York that may not be held in common everywhere? By acknowledging your uniqueness as a diocese of the Episcopal Church, that can help you figure out who God is calling you to be in the future. Often, what God is calling me to do is leave behind some of the junk that I'm carrying, to lay down some of the baggage that I'm carrying. That's why I confess my sins multiple times a day. It may be that as a diocese, you all are being called to leave behind some of the unhealthy things that you've done in the past. I don't know of a single diocese that doesn't have some of those things. But also, what is God calling you to be in the future as a diocese? What are you being called into? And the more you can have some clarity about that, the more you can recognize who God is sending to be your next bishop. Another way at that same concept is to ask, what is the work you know you are called to do in the next 3 to 5 years? It's hard to do a 10 or 20 year long-range plan because the plans will change in the next 3 to 5 years. But probably right now, your standing committee and many of the clergy and lay leaders of the diocese already know, look, in the next few years, we're going to need to do this and this and this, whether we want to or not. You want to make sure that you choose a bishop who wants to and is able to help you do those specific things. So, for example, you've been sharing a bishop for a while. I would imagine that some of the new work needs to be figuring out, what does it mean that we're not sharing a bishop now in the future, and what does that look like? You probably want someone who can come in and work with you to discern how you as a diocese working with a bishop should be going forward. That's some specific work. There may be other things like how do we resolve some budgetary issues or pressures? There may be other work like we have small congregations that are struggling for their very survival while we have other congregations that are wealthy and well endowed. How do we be a diocese together? That may be some specific work you're called to do. It may also be that you're called to bear witness to the good news of Jesus Christ in Western New York in particular ways. And so it may be that that is some of the specific work you're called to do. To me, healthy discernment involves as many voices as we possibly can, but focuses those voices on asking some specific questions around who is God calling us, what is God calling us to be as a diocese, and what's the work God is calling us to do as a diocese. Question number 2 is, what would you say to a diocese that engaged in an innovative Episcopal model, like sharing a bishop with a neighboring diocese, that didn't unfold as hoped? Well, I think I'll say that part of my experience of walking with Jesus Christ is that a lot of things didn't turn out the way I hoped they would. So I would not see it as a failure. I would see it as a learning opportunity. And to me, the most important thing is that we learn from experiences that didn't go the way we thought they would or didn't go the way that we wanted them to. I think there are things that you have learned both by sharing a bishop and by the fact that that is not going to be permanent, that you can share with the wider church. So I would hope that you would take some time specifically to write down and share, or make a video and share what are some learnings, maybe both positive and negative. Hey, if you're going to share a bishop, do this and this and this. If you're going to share a bishop, make sure you don't do this and this and this. It would be really helpful, I think, for the wider church to benefit from the learnings that you all in the Diocese of Western New York have gathered over the last stretch. I would also say that part of the work is to imagine a new future that is not what you thought it might be. And there's a lot of excitement in that. There's some yearning in that. So I would say, as a part of your discernment, reimagine what it means to be a diocese. Now, there may be some practical and financial things that made it attractive to share a bishop with another diocese. Those pressures may not have gone away. It may also be that you need to spend some time reimagining what it looks like to have your own bishop. But I would say the most important thing is, don't look at it as a failure. Look at it as an opportunity for learning, both for you and for the wider church. You all shared a bishop for a season. Now you're entering a new season. So don't rebuild the new season based on either gripes or frustrations from the past. Let it go and move into God's future in a new way. Encourage each other to imagine who God is calling you to be now and in the future by letting go of who God called you to be in the past. Third question. What qualities and charisms do you believe a bishop of the mid-21st century must embody? These are fascinating and interesting times to be a part of the Episcopal Church, and really fascinating times to be a bishop. I will say that I have been surprised that over the past 7 years, a lot of the work that I am doing as a bishop is reminding people what the core of being an Episcopal church is really about, in a season where all of who we are is potentially up for grabs. What I mean by that is, I grew up as an Episcopalian, and there were some non-negotiable things that every Episcopal church always assumed were standard. I grew up at a time where the Book of Common Prayer, 1979, was in every pew. I grew up at a time, I remember the 28 prayer book, where we were all praying the same Eucharistic prayer every single Sunday. Now we are in an environment where there's a lot of liturgical diversity, and there's a lot of theological diversity in a way that is different. And we are a church that has, God has sent us wonderful people and leaders, both clergy and lay, who were formed in other traditions. So there are a lot of former Roman Catholics, former Methodists, former Congregationalists who have joined our Episcopal Church because they love who we are, and they're also bringing Methodist, Presbyterian, Congregational ideas into our Episcopal Church. And I find that a lot of the work of the bishop is to guard the doctrine, discipline, and worship of Christ as this church has received them. Which means I think we need bishops today especially who know, love, and understand our Episcopal tradition, and are also able to help guide us into a new future where the internet is more powerful than a book on a shelf, and where it is time for us to bring out of the storehouse what is new and what is old. So we need bishops with wisdom who know the tradition and are able to decide what is core for our identity as the Episcopal Church, what should not change from what we've inherited, and what should change, how should we adapt moving into the future. The image I like to use is it's like we've inherited a beautiful mansion from our ancestors, but the beautiful mansion is kind of falling down, and we don't have butlers and maids anymore to serve everybody, and we don't need all the china and the silver cups that they used to use in the past. And so we need to decide, what do we sell, what do we remodel, what do we fix up? But we've inherited something that is beautiful. And so we need wise bishops, because people, priests, lay people, leaders are going to be asking that bishop, hey, can we try this? What about that? Should we do that? Can we let go of that rule? And that is where you need a bishop who will hold the line on what is core, but also help the church adapt and grow into the future. What qualities do you think a bishop in the mid-21st century needs to embody? There's a wonderful saying that comes out of the rule of St. Benedict, and it is that when the monks are selecting an abbot, they are looking for the most monkish monk. The monk who most embodies the rule of St. Benedict is the one that's supposed to be called to be the abbot. That doesn't mean that the abbot is the most charismatic person, not necessarily the smartest person, not necessarily the most experienced person. They could be very young, they could be very old. But the monks are encouraged to call as their leader the most monkish one of them, the one who most embodies the rule of St. Benedict. I think that is good advice for a diocese to think about as you think about who your next bishop should be. They should be the person that most embodies the diocese that you want to be, the one that most resembles and acts like and sounds like who you are being called to be, the one who embodies the values and the faith of the Diocese of Western New York. That's who your next bishop ought to be. And I think that's the role of a bishop, really, is to embody the faith of the diocese. And so it's a very different role from being a kind of elected leader like the governor or the president of the United States. It is to be kind of a humble, embodied example of the practice of the Christian faith in Western New York in 2026, 2025, 2027. That is the goal. You're looking for the priest who you say, yeah, that's who we are. That person, the way they act, the way they live, the way they talk, that is the faith that we want the world to see. That's who we are all trying to be. So find the most monkish monk. That's who, the most bishopy bishop. That's the one that you're looking for. I've said this before in other places. Since about the 5th century, being a bishop has become more and more about being a distant administrator, almost like the governor of your state. You know who the governor is. You may have met the governor at a fundraiser or something, but do you really know who the governor is? Do they have a real awareness of who you are in your life? I think too much in our church, the bishop has become this distant administrator. And I think what we need now are bishops that know and love their people. Going back to the ancient church, when we were a persecuted religious minority, when we were not sort of publicly recognized as important people, bishops were pastors and teachers of the faith. They did administration with the support of the deacons by living out the faith, making sure the church was still church. I still think it's the bishop's responsibility to help strengthen the church, and that does involve Title IV and misconduct stuff. It does involve diocesan council. It does involve meeting with the standing committee. It does involve administering who is called to be ordained as deacon and priest in the diocese. But I keep going back to something Michael Curry taught me on the first day I came to work with him. He said, everyone thinks the bishop has all this power to, define policy and direction for the diocese. The reality is a lot of the diocese is run by committees of people who are elected and appointed to those roles, and their leadership and energy drives a lot of what a diocese does. But Michael Curry told me there are 3 areas in which a bishop has actual influence on the life and character of a diocese, and those are the areas I think a bishop needs to focus on. The first one is who is ordained in the diocese has a huge impact on the future of the diocese and its character. So a bishop needs to focus on not just what we call the ordination process, but on the discernment process of creating an environment and a system where lay leaders and ordained leaders are being raised up and inspired to take up roles of leadership in the diocese. The canons are very clear. We are not just called to raise up people for ordination. We are called also to raise up and encourage and prepare lay leaders for the lay leadership roles in the diocese. So the bishop needs to be helping focus on discernment of who are the lay leaders we need, who is being called to be ordained. That influences the character of a diocese in a tremendous way, and it's something that the bishop has a direct impact on. Nobody can be ordained unless the bishop lays their hands on their head. So the bishop needs to focus on that. Who is raised up for leadership, and how does that discernment process go? That's the first thing. The second thing is clergy transitions in the diocese. Who comes into the diocese from outside to serve as rectors of the congregation? In every moment of congregational transition, every time a congregation is looking for a priest, there's an opportunity for them to get closer to the diocese, get to know their bishop better, for the bishop to know and understand their ministry and their future, to help them find the leadership they need. If it's a part-time vicar role, the bishop needs to be involved in knowing that congregation and helping them find the clergy leadership that they need. So clergy transitions, that's an important thing the bishop needs to pay attention to, in addition to the discernment and ordination stuff. And the third thing is responding to crisis. In a crisis, whether it's an allegation of misconduct or a financial issue or a flood or a weather event, whenever a congregation is in crisis, whenever the normal pastoral resources of a congregation are overwhelmed, the bishop needs to be there, because what happens in those times of crisis either strengthens the trust the congregation has in the diocese and the bishop, or erodes that trust. The bishop's pastoral response is not to be in there micromanaging or meddling in the congregation, but when the congregation is in crisis, that's when they need their bishop to step up and be physically and spiritually and prayerfully present. So those 3 areas, I think, are the key foci for a bishop. Who gets ordained and who is raised up for lay leadership? How does that work? When a congregation's in transition and looking for new clergy, how does that work? And when a congregation is in crisis, how does the diocese respond? Those are the areas a bishop needs to focus on. What are the most misunderstood aspects of being a bishop? I think, quite frankly, most clergy and most lay people have no idea what a bishop does every day. I would interview the people that work on the bishop's staff to help those electing the bishop understand what a bishop actually does day in and day out. Multiple times every day, when I pick up a phone or respond to a situation, it is a situation that is going to impact the future of that congregation for the next decade or longer. Most of the time when people call me to ask for assistance, they're calling me after they've exhausted all of the other options they have. It can be kind of a big deal or even an intimidating thing to call the bishop's office and ask for help. So the bishops are dealing with, and often what we do, if we do it well, you don't even know we were working on it. But the bishop's office and the bishop themselves are engaged in the things that are impacting the long-term future of the life and health of a particular congregation or deanery or area ministry or what have you. It is about making sure that everything that is done carefully and thoughtfully and pastorally. So a lot of people don't know what the bishop does, and I would encourage you to ask and do interviews with the bishop's administrator, with canons to the ordinary or those who work with the bishop. Just interview them and say, what does the bishop actually do? Make sure the electors in convention understand the job so that they're not just thinking they're electing their favorite parish rector. The bishop's role, as is described in a lot of studies that have been done on the Episcopal Church, if you are a parish priest and you've become a bishop, 80% of what you need to know as a bishop, you have not encountered as being a rector, even the rector of a large congregation. It doesn't mean that rectors are not capable bishops. Many of our wonderful bishops come from a long line of rectors without ever working at the diocesan level until they're ordained. But it's important that both the candidates and the electors have some understanding of what the bishop actually does. Most people in the Episcopal Church, I think, don't know what a bishop actually does day in and day out. So I'd encourage you to ask those who work most closely with the bishop, what is the work? And that will help inform your decision making. What words of wisdom, hope, and encouragement would I offer to the Diocese of Western New York? It is this: the one that is calling you is faithful. This is my favorite passage from Scripture, and I find it to be true. God is calling you forward. God has work for you to do. The Holy Spirit is moving through your diocese and calling you to a future that perhaps you can't see. But don't you get discouraged. Don't worry. God is faithful and will be there for you. There is work to do, and you matter, Diocese of Western New York. The rest of us in the Episcopal Church are counting on you to be the Episcopal Church in Western New York in this moment and in the future. We need the Episcopal Church there, and we need you to be that church. So thanks be to God for you and all that you are doing. Let me know if I can help in any way. God bless you. God is faithful. Y'all are going to be fine.